Hi, my name is Jim and I was retired. Warning, this video may offend some people, but I'll try to keep it in line with the spirit of this channel, entertaining ideas from one educated consumer to another. Once upon a time, you could have an intelligent and enlightening conversation with people with different views. But that's all over now with this woke world that we live in today. In this video, I'm going to challenge some questions here, and I'm going to ask, how do you spell woke? Some opinion writers have called this the Great Awokening, after the Great Awakening earlier in our American history. And earlier, I asked on Twitter, how do you spell woke? Well, in this video, I'm going to explore 3 different ways to spell woke. In academia, they spell woke CRT, and that stands for critical race theory. It's a neo-Marxist idea that upends everything I learned in education growing up, and that was to follow the principles of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. But CRT would have you twist that all around, and skin color is the first thing you need to look at. So what is critical race theory? Here's an article that I found recently by Julian Adorni. Critical race theory is one of the most hot-button issues in America today. What makes it even more divisive is the fact that no one can quite agree on what it means. Supporters say it's simply understanding and combating racism. Detractors contend that it's un-American, divisive, and racist. So what is critical race theory? The author uses the proponents of this theory's own words to define it. Defenders say that CRT is about identifying and addressing systemic racism. That is, it's about exploring how laws and systems can have racist effects today, even if they were made or repealed decades ago. Kimberly Crenshaw, law professor who teaches at UCLA and Columbia University, and one of the founders of the theory, describes it this way. Critical race theory is a practice. It's an approach to grappling with the history of white supremacy and rejects the belief that what's in the past is in the past, and that the laws and systems that grow from the past are detached from it. As he describes criticisms of this, he says, unfortunately, critical race theory is a subset of critical theory, a branch of academia that explicitly rejects objectivity, the scientific method, and critical thinking in general. Instead, it prioritizes activism, and practitioners wade into complicated situations believing they already know the answers. And crippled by this approach, CRT isn't much good at finding the truth, which is an essential first step in making things better. Now, the corporate elite spell woke, not CRT, but DEI. And perhaps because of the reaction CRT has gotten in academia, they came up with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And who could be against those ideals, right? Except their views of diversity actually reject diversity of ideas and perspectives in favor of a quota system on diversity. And DEI strives for equity of outcome as opposed to equality of opportunity. And rather than becoming more inclusive, the corporate world is becoming more insular, not inclusive. In the City Journal has an article by Christopher Rufo from the Manhattan Institute, and points out that he's surveyed the top Fortune 100 firms and found that nearly all of them have DEI programs. And these initiatives are no longer limited to high-tech firms in the coastal enclaves. They've spread to traditionally conservative sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, insurance, and oil and gas. And the result is clear. Every major corporation in the United States has submitted to the DEI ideology and begun to make it a permanent part of the legal and human resources bureaucracy. And no doubt some of these programs are benign. Many companies adopt DEI policies out of pressure to conform. But others, however, use diversity, equity, and inclusion to promote the most virulent strands of critical race theory and gender ideology. And Christopher has documented examples like the Bank of America teaching employees that the United States is a system of white supremacy, Walmart telling workers that they are guilty of internalized racial superiority. This is just ridiculous nonsense that's divisive and not really productive. I was retired, thankfully, 6 years ago, so I did not have to go through a lot of DEI workshops. When I was in corporate America, the vogue was Six Sigma, and the focus was on productivity. And now the focus is on progressivism. I'll put links to all three of the articles I'm reviewing in the notes below. Read them for yourself and find out if these spellings of woke sound any better than woke. As I was retired 6 years ago, I haven't had to deal with DEI. And my children are well beyond their education years, so CRT is not a front burner issue for me. But as a DIY investor, I am concerned about how the investment world is now spelling woke. They're spelling it ESG, and that stands for environmental, social, and governance factors. It's called sustainable investing. And now brokers and mutual funds and rating agencies and consultants want to come up with ESG ratings of your investments. And worse, the Biden administration in both the U.S. Labor Department and the SEC are favoring using these ESG factors in investment decisions. Now, this article outlines the Labor Department's rules particularly as troublesome because people who run pensions are supposed to be fiduciaries for their plan participants. This actually begins noting that while folks think sustainable investing, another phrase you'll hear used for ESG factors, is going to lead to enhanced returns, says Al Gore, who discovered the internet, the claims haven't aged well because ESG funds are underperforming their non-ESG peers. And whilst that may have some people stepping back from ESG funds, the new regulations may force them to think about them. It notes that last year, the U.S. Labor Department proposed a regulation that would tell retirement fund managers to consider ESG factors such as climate change and collateral benefits other than investment returns when investing employees' money. And this would encourage America's perpetually underfunded pension funds to invest in politically correct but unproven ESG strategies. And it would also violate retirees' basic rights to have their money invested solely to advance their financial interests. It notes that retirement and pension fund managers are fiduciaries, legally required to make every investment decision with one purpose, maximizing retirees' financial interests. It also noted that the Uniform Prudent Investor Act, a model law adopted by 44 states, makes it clear that no form of so-called social investing is lawful if the investment activity entails sacrificing the interests of beneficiaries in favor of the interests and supposed benefits by pursuing a particular social cause. And that has been built into the ERISA, Employee Retirement Income Security Act itself, which went to a Supreme Court case in 2014 that upheld that fiduciary role of the folks that run pension funds. Here's something else to think about the ESG investments. Again, I favor broad-based market passive investing. I'm not going to try to pick winners and losers, let alone let Davos decide who the winner and loser is. So instead of a ESG form of the S&P 500 that leaves out Tesla, for instance, I'm choosing VTI for a broad-based all-market inclusion. Also, watch out, some ESG investments have higher net expense ratios than their non-ESG peers. Somebody has to pay for all of that subjective rating of these ESG factors, right? I'll conclude with my standard warning. I am not an investment advisor. I am not an accountant. I'm not a consultant. I have no initials after my name. So take these as entertaining ideas from one educated consumer to another. Always do your own due diligence and seek out a professional if you need one. See you next time.